Hi, everyone, and welcome to Joe DiMaggio Children's Hospital's State of Mental Health and the impact that it has on children and their caregivers. Pediatric mental health is at a breaking point, and the pandemic has brought this hidden crisis to the surface. With COVID-19 sweeping our world in the last year, there remains many questions about how we're going to move forward and emerge from these difficult times. We have today Dr. Brandy Huey. She's a licensed clinical therapist, child and adolescent psychiatry. And I know today you're going to discuss the tools for managing social anxiety. So I guess the first question I have for you, Dr. Huey, is can you define social anxiety? It's something we hear all the time, but what is it?
Social anxiety is when we have a significant discomfort and avoidance of social and performance situations or scenarios. So for kids, that might look like avoiding group projects or avoiding presentations. It could also look like avoiding social scenarios with friends or sporting events. So when they're challenged in having some of these conversations and they're not really socializing like they were, or they seem very intimidated to have just very basic conversations, that would be a red flag that maybe there's something going on there that we need to discuss and dive in deeper.
Okay, so how does one identify if their child has social anxiety, and what are some of the tools that we can use to help them cope with it?
If having a simple conversation, even over dinner, or just asking a check-in question of how you're doing, turns into something that looks like fear on their face, or they're very avoidant of it altogether, that's when you want to check in a little bit deeper, sit down with them. In terms of coping, what helps is to understand what it is. And one of the techniques that I use with some of my patients is I ask them to make a chart. I tell them to write out all the signs that they notice when they start to become anxious in social situations. Does that look like my tummy hurts? Does that look like I have a dry mouth? Does it look like I have sweaty palms? What are some of the indicators that I can physically feel that something's not okay and maybe I'm off balance, and that walking into this, I'm feeling very anxious to present or to talk? We can try and breathe and relax right before we go into a scenario that would cause us to be very socially anxious. And we can talk to our loved ones. I think one of the biggest things that this pandemic has brought is that extra time. So use that wisely with your kids to sit down and say, is there anything you want to get off your chest? You know, I notice this is going on. Can we sort of explore that? But also challenge your thoughts. What evidence is there to show that going into this social scenario, that it's going to turn out bad? Oftentimes kids are avoidant of these because they're fearful that it's going to go bad, or that they're going to fail, or they're going to be mocked or made fun of. But if they sat down and challenged the evidence, they would see 9 times out of 10, there isn't any, and that they are going to be okay. And you can also practice some of these skills at home. So let's say there's a presentation or a tough conversation. Practice with your siblings, practice with loved ones or a trusted adult. Practice helps them in the long run.
How concerned are you, or are you concerned about social anxiety increasing once kids go back to school and go back into the world and are, they've been isolated for so long, and now all of a sudden it's like, hey, here's the real world, get back into it. It's got to be challenging.
It's challenging. And while we could sit and say, throwing them back into school, it may cause a little bit of a disruption, I think kids are going to be fine. I think that the isolation from the pandemic has only created this underlying desire of wanting to have more connection. And the second we do go back and they have the opportunity to see their friends, to see the teachers that used to wave them goodbye off to the bus, or the counselors that would check in with them, I think the second they start to get back into the groove, they're going to feel more confident. And that social anxiety is sort of going to decrease a little bit. It may be there in the beginning, but give it some time, work through it. And I think we'll start to get back to that good feeling.
And last question for you, Brandy, what can parents and even schools do to help kids that are experiencing social anxiety, especially when the school year starts back up again?
Know the signs for parents, know the signs of what causes, the social anxiety. What is it that my kid tends to do? Are they acting, a little bit different than they would before? Create a safe space. You want your kids to come talk to you. So it's important that we create a very non-judgmental arena for them to speak about these tough topics, because if they go to approach you and they feel like they're being met with a lot of defensiveness, that's going to shut them down and they're not going to want to talk. Use grounding techniques like box breathing. One of the exercises I do with a lot of my patients is I have them breathe in for 4 seconds, hold for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and hold that for 4 seconds. And sort of doing that repeatedly has been found to be helpful for them. And the last thing I tell parents and caregivers is to use an acronym that I developed called LOVE. And it's very simple. You want to listen, but actively listen to your child to understand what's going on. Offer support if they ask for it. Sometimes they just want you to hear them. Validate their feelings. It's been a really tough, challenging year. I know that's been hard for you. So try to understand where they're coming from. And lastly, examine your own expectations. Make sure that you're not pushing your agenda onto your child. And as for schools, I think from a school standpoint, they could try to host more events that would be geared towards demonstrating positive adolescent mental health. There's lots of school counselors, there's lots of school social workers, there's lots of mental health support staff that would love to sort of help in demonstrating what that is. I did interviews back in 2017 and found that a lot of school staff wanted to be able to host some of these events and put these on for kids to help demonstrate what a healthy mindset would look like. So if they're given the opportunity to do so, that might be a good way for schools to get involved in improving mental health among kids.
Well, Dr. Huey, I hate to use a pun, but I love your acronym, and that is so helpful, and you need to trademark that. I'm just curious if you have any final thoughts for parents as they head into the summer in regards to social anxiety. Is there anything parents need to be doing with their kids this summer, or should this be a summer of relaxation? Hello, celebrating, we made it through the pandemic. Now let's rest and recharge for next year.
Kristen, that's exactly it. That would be my response. Is this is a summer where we need to relax. It has been a very difficult and challenging year for not only students and patients, but for caregivers, parents, for teachers, everyone. I think this would be the time where we take a step back, enjoy the extra time you have before we go into the fall, whether it's taking that trip you've always wanted to do, a camping, or even if you do it in the backyard. Reading, watching movies, catching up on all these fun activities that kids feel like and families in general have missed out on because of the pandemic. So that would be a good way to reconnect, particularly to eliminate some of that stress and worry as we ease into less, restrictions as the pandemic slowly comes to an end and we move into the fall season.
Absolutely. And thank you all for watching. If you need more information about anything you've seen here, we're going to link it, but you can also go to jdch.com/services/psychiatry. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.